There we go. And to our dedicated professionals on the CPSA designation pathway, we're pleased to inform you that the session does qualify for 1 professional development unit. Following the session, all participants will receive a personalized certificate of participation, downloadable and shareable on your LinkedIn profile. Now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Jeff to start.
All right. Well, thanks, Rupalin. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to see everybody there. By the way, I'm located here just outside Toronto, so I'm on Eastern time zone. So welcome to Predict the Unpredictable. We're going to talk about big deals destined to derail your forecast before it's too late, some of the pitfalls around big deal management. I'm going to talk about really what makes big deals so unpredictable, what some of the pitfalls are. And then I'm going to give you 5 of my top questions that you can use either as a rep or with your sales teams to really determine whether your sales team is ruthlessly qualifying their big deals so you don't get any nasty last-minute forecast surprises. So let's get started. A few questions, though, before we do. You might be wondering, am I in the right place? Okay. So this session is really intended for first-line sales leaders, so sales managers who have sales reps reporting to them. It's also focused on second-line sales leaders, directors who have managers reporting to them, VPs, GMs, owners of businesses. Sales reps themselves, even if you have no direct reports, will also get a lot from the program because it'll help you think about some things you might not be paying attention to. And then finally, it's for sales team members who really just want to make a bigger contribution to their team sales campaigns. So if you're interested in helping yourself or your team win more big deals, you're in the right place. All right? So hopefully nobody drops off now because they realize they're in the wrong session. Now, the next question that might be on your mind is, okay, this is great, so why can't Jeff actually help you? So the first reason I think I can help is I'm an engineer by training, so I've been accused of being a bit analytical, and so I take a bit of a structured process approach to sales leadership and managing big deals. You can see my credentials there. I'm a University of Waterloo graduate, did some business course. I took a minor at Wilfrid Laurier, which is just up the street. I'm a professional engineer, and through my career, I had secret government clearance. But in the end, I'm a salesperson. And so I started my career a long time ago with Hewlett-Packard, back when Hewlett-Packard was still called HP. I was a sales rep. I got promoted to be a sales manager, district sales manager. I ran several branches within Canada. And then I took my first country leadership role, VP GM role, with Data General. Some of you may remember Data General. They were a $1 billion tech company. They got bought by EMC and later by Dell. I also spent 14 and a half years, so 15 years running the Canadian subsidiary of NetApp Canada. Now, NetApp is a Silicon Valley-based data storage company. They're a $5.5 billion operation. When I joined NetApp in Canada, we were 14 people and $17 million. When I retired 15 years later, we were a $200 million business with 125 employees. And that was really my first failed attempt at retirement. After the second time of cleaning out my sock drawer, my wife suggested maybe I should go back and do another gig, because I was too young to retire. So I went back and ran Veeam Software, which is a $1 billion software company in the software and cloud business, in the data replication business. Now, all of my background is in tech, but what I'm going to discuss today doesn't involve technology. I'm not going to talk about tech at all. There's no feeds and speeds that I'm going to talk about. I'm really going to talk about steps and stakeholders in complex sales campaigns. And so one of my clients is in the oil rig business. And you might go, well, that's not very technology related, but to sell $1 million oil rigs and transport them, they're very complex sales. So this is really all about helping your sales teams, helping you as a rep run better complex sales campaigns. And the third reason I can help is I actually eat my own dog food. I've completed I kind of stopped counting, 3,000 forecast calls. Throughout my career, we ran a weekly forecast meeting. We ran a monthly 30, 60, 90 for the quarter. And I've reviewed over 300 big deals using the methodology that I'm going to talk about today. So What I did when I retired and started salesleadersonly.com is I packaged up my knowledge. I actually wrote a book called Winning the Six-Figure Sale, and I teach a program to sales teams to help them inspect, assess, and coach their team's complex sales campaigns. So I have a lot of experience around big deal management, sales leadership, and that's what I hope to share with you today. Again, no fees and speeds, no technology. How do you run complex sales campaigns? And my view is across many different industries, the steps are actually very similar. Okay? So let's talk about my objectives. My objectives today are fourfold. I want to first help improve your big deal win rates. Win, loss, deferred, no decision. I'm kind of all about helping you increase your big deal win rates. Improve your monthly or quarterly sales forecasting. And my experience is if you've got a bunch of big deals in your forecast and they slip out of the forecast towards the end of the quarter or month, it's very tough to actually hit your sales forecast. My boss would just say, hey, replace them. But it's very hard to replace a big deal in your forecast with 3 weeks to go. So this is really intended to help you improve your monthly and quarterly forecasting accuracy, help you get more objective about big deal inspection and review, and in the process, give you some tools to help you coach your reps through complex sales campaigns. So those are my objectives. What I hope you go away with today from a learning outcomes is to get more intentional and deliberate about big deal inspection. I'm going to talk about big deal inspection versus the forecast in just a few minutes. I'm going to introduce you to 5 critical questions you can use tomorrow in your business that sales leaders should be asking their reps or sales reps should be asking themselves to help them be more successful. And then I'll help sales teams get more clarity about the quality of their sales campaigns early in the forecast process. So the whole idea is, should this big deal be in my forecast in the first place? Because the last thing I want to do is put big deals in, call a number, and then disappoint my boss because the big deals I were counting on aren't going to close when happen. The worst thing is, hey, I would have reps talk to me and go, hey, Jeff, the good news is that deal slipped, but it's not lost. Well, we commit a number to our corporations and we have to hit that number. So slip deals, deferred deals, deals with no decisions are big problems in the forecasting business. So those are the learning incomes. Get more intentional and deliberate, give you some tools you can use right away, and help you view the quality of, improve the quality of your complex sales campaigns. Now I'm going to show you some tools, some assets that at the end of the session, I'll show you where you can download the assets. They're free. My contribution to everybody. You can just go to this page, download those for free, and use them tomorrow. Okay? So that's what we're all about. We'll take questions at the end for sure. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to cover is, why are big deals so unpredictable? And if you're a sales leader, first line, second line, third line, you know that big deals are great when you win them, but there's a lot of risk associated with them, and they're unpredictable. And so let's spend a few minutes now, before I get to the questions you can use to really diagnose your big deals, and talk about, why are big deals so unpredictable? Well, the first reason is that customers use a lot of criteria when selecting a solution. And so if the deal is small, I'll talk about this in a moment. We kind of view it's a game of checkers. It's really functionality and cost. If you're selling a small deal, and a small deal is relative to your organization, but if you're selling a $1,000 deal or a $5,000 deal and you're in a volume business, it's about functionality and cost. Does the solution do the job I say it will? Is the cost within the budget? Typically, you're selling to somebody who has the budget and can approve it. So those deals are pretty straightforward. We're not going to spend any time talking about those kind of deals. But as the deals get bigger, now I talk about medium-sized deals, it's not just functionality and cost, it's also relationships get involved, vendor preference get involved, the after-sales support gets involved. Those start to become criteria that customers worry about. And then in large, complex deals, you have all that we talked about before: functionality, cost, relationship, vendor preference, support. You also have brand. Customers worry about the brand of solution they're buying. They worry about the vendor's long-term strategy and sometimes long-term viability. And there's also politics involved. So you can see that there's really a lot of things that customers have to consider when making a large acquisition. Okay, and you need to be able to pay attention to those through your sales campaign. Now, as I said, my background is in tech, and I often would be working with technical salespeople. Technical salespeople love to sell to technical buyers with money. So it's all about feeds and speeds in technology. But complex deals are unpredictable because it's not just a technical campaign you're running. There's also an economic and political campaign. So some of the stakeholders we'll talk about in a moment don't worry about the feeds and speeds, but they worry about the long-term strategy and viability and relationship with their vendor. They worry about vendor preference. They worry about politics. They worry about brand. So as you can see, there's a lot of buyers you need to sell to who worry about different things and could derail your deal even if you have a great technical solution. So I call this checkers and chess. You know, the question is your team playing checkers or chess? Are they being tactical in their sales campaign and focused on feeds and speeds? Or are they being strategic and looking over the horizon at next steps and all the stakeholders? So how can you tell? So let's talk about this for a moment. How can you tell whether your team is playing checkers or chess? I go, chess is the ultimate game of strategy. It requires a well thought through and precisely executed plan to attack and defend depending on the competition and the circumstances. If there are any chess players in the audience, that's chess. Thinking several steps ahead and deciding what your next step will be based on what the customer or your competition does. Checkers, on the other hand, is more like a street fight. Very tactical and only works for small or less strategic deals. So my hope today is I'm going to help you be better chess players in this complex world of complex sales. Now, how else can you tell? Here's some questions that we're going to cover in the second part of my presentation about checkers or chess. How wide and deep is your team selling, and are they covering all their bases? That's a chess question. Do you have a competitive edge in your sales campaign? And I'm not talking about technology. That's a chess question. What compelling event will ensure your deal closes as expected and when expected? Okay? What needs, and more importantly, what business outcomes will your solution address? Needs versus business outcomes. We're going to talk about that. Most technical sellers are focused on the customer's needs, but financial decision makers aren't focused on technology. They're focused on business outcomes. And the question is, are your sales team helping those buyers with translating your product into what it can do from them from a business perspective? And then finally, what fatal flaws in your sales campaign is the customer uncovering? And we'll talk about that as my last and actually favorite question. So those are the 5 questions, and there are many more, but those are the 5 we're going to cover today in our limited time that help you determine whether your team is being strategic in their sales approach or being very tactical. Okay? So that's one of the reasons, one of the pitfalls around why big deals are so unpredictable. The second one is there are a lot of steps in a complex sales campaign. So if we were together in a room, I would ask you to raise your hand and tell me how many steps are there in a complex sales campaign. And I'd ask you, can you name the top 10 steps in a complex sales campaign? And in my experience, most sales leaders off the top of their head can get 5 or 6 steps in a complex sales campaign. They don't get all 10. So here's a bit of what I call a big deal roadmap. These are the top 10 steps, and they don't happen necessarily in this particular order, but these are the steps that sales teams need to cover off in a complex sales campaign. And this is one of the reasons why I call big deals complex, because as you can see, there are a lot of steps. You need to structure your deal and get your deal approved internally. Often big deals require big deal discounts, lower gross margins. Most organizations have a process reps need to go through to get their deals approved before they present pricing to the customer. So structuring your deal is all part of running a complex sales campaign. And then the team needs to qualify the customer for budget and authority. They need to qualify for needs and timing. So, budget, authority, need, and timing, that's banned. IBM invented that term 1,000 years ago, but that's all part of the selling process. You then need to structure a solution and actually architect a solution to meet the customer's requirements. You need to develop a winning sales strategy. This is something a lot of people miss. What's my sales strategy going to be based on what I think the customer needs and what I think the customer requires? Do I have a competitive edge? All the technology sounds the same. All the PowerPoint decks look the same. All the vendors make the same claims. So how do you develop a competitive edge? We're going to talk about that for sure. Then what about a partnering strategy? Most vendors don't sell direct 100% of the time. They often have partners who they sell with and sell through. And so how do you develop a partnering strategy so that 1 + 1 = 3, and you actually cover all your bases in synergy with your partner? That's one that some people have trouble with. How do you ensure customer success before you get your purchase order? I'll repeat that. We all worry about customers, but often we don't bake in all the training and implementation services the customer needs before you get your purchase order, and then trying to get them to buy implementation and training after the fact is very difficult. So part of this whole process in running a complex sales campaign is ensuring customer success before you get your order. And then how do you negotiate the deal? I think everybody understands negotiating part of the complex. And then how do you develop a next step action plan across your entire sales team? Who's doing what to whom? How are you covering all your bases and all your stakeholders in what is a complex sales campaign? So that's the big deal roadmap with lots of pitfalls, as you can imagine. But those are the steps, whether you're selling technology, whether you're selling oil rigs, whether you're selling, apartment complexes. Big deals require lots of steps and lots of stakeholders I'll talk to out in just a moment. So if you have any questions about, please send it to me. The big deal roadmap is in your downloadable toolkit. So you can download that, print it out, put it on your desk, and check yourself to see how you're doing against all those steps and stakeholders. Okay, the third reason big deals are so unpredictable is there are a lot of stakeholders in a complex sales campaign. So this is another thing I would do if we were all together. Can you name all the stakeholders you need to meet and influence? Okay. Again, I'm in technology. The technical sales rep would be talking to the technical recommenders and technical decision makers about how great our technology was. But often, the person making the final technical decision actually has to go upstairs and get their budget approved to get the project approved. So who else is involved from a stakeholder in a complex sales campaign? You have the economic decision maker. He's often the financial approver, might be the CFO. If you're in the cloud business, you have somebody deciding, do I buy Microsoft's cloud, Google's cloud, Amazon cloud? You might have somebody who's deciding on the platform. You have a technical decision maker and a technical recommender. They could be the VP of technology, the chief information officer, the chief technology officer, the chief security officer. Lots of different acronyms, but all stakeholders you need to cover off. You need to find a coach. We're going to talk to you about a coach. I think a coach is a critical person inside a complex sales campaign. You might find a champion. You find a fox. We're going to talk about all these definitions in just a few minutes. So as you can see, there's a lot of steps and stakeholders in a complex sales campaign. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong that force your deal to get delayed or not to happen. Lots of pitfalls in a complex sales campaign. And the final one, and again, this is based on my experience, is no intentional and deliberate review process for big deals. So I believe that 95% of all sales leaders do not have an intentional and deliberate process to inspect their big deals this quarter and next quarter. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If we were doing this together, I would ask the team, I would ask everybody in the audience, do you have an intentional and deliberate process to inspect your big deals? And everybody would stand up. And then I would say, excluding the forecast call, and 90% of the people would sit down because most sales leaders use the forecast call to inspect their big deals. And then I would say, okay, exclude the forecast call this quarter. Who has a process to look at deals next quarter? And most people would sit down, right? So, what sales leaders have is instinct and experience. Think about it. Most sales leaders get their job because they're great sales reps. They get promoted. So they have lots of instinct and experience, and that's great, and that's required. But intentional and deliberate, a structured sales approach that they use around every deal to make sure they don't miss steps or stakeholders, not so much. Now, this is where my sales leaders, hey, Jeff, you're an engineer. You way over-engineer the stuff. Well, as part of the program I teach, we do this thing called a Big Rock Review. And I think some of the sales leaders who have large geographies to cover, as VP and GM of the Canadian subs, I spent 40 to 50% of my time traveling. I covered a large territory, and I needed a way to quickly know whether a big deal was actually going to happen in the forecast. There were some quarters I would have $15 million deals in the pipeline in the forecast, and I would need to know whether those deals were actually going to happen. Okay. And so the challenge is I didn't have that much time, right? And if you get sales reps in a room and you want to go through strategy, those can be 2-hour meetings. In fact, when I started my career, we used to do this thing called a blue sheet. Some of you may recall this. We'd spent a day working on a big deal. But as a busy sales leader, I don't have a day anymore to get involved with the sales leaders and sales reps. But I would take 1 hour and do what I call a Big Rock Review to crawl through a deal, inspect it, assess it, and through the process, coach the reps around steps and stakeholders they might be meeting. My goal with the Big Rock Review was always to help ensure the reps left with a better sales strategy after the review than when they started. Okay? That's what I mean about intentional and deliberate. So ask yourself whether you've got a standard set of questions that you go through with your reps to make sure they're covering all their bases. And in my experience, most sales leaders depend on their instinct and gut feel, but intentional and deliberate, not so much. Okay? You might disagree, but that's my experience, having worked in the technology industry for quite a while. So there you have it. These are the pitfalls. This is why big deals are so unpredictable. Customers have a lot of criteria to selecting a solution. There's a lot of steps in a complex sales campaign. I've identified 10. There's lots of sub-steps within those 10 steps. There are a lot of stakeholders, decision makers in a complex sales campaign. I think the last number I saw was there are 7 decision makers in a complex sales campaign. Are your sales reps covering all their bases? We're going to talk about that in just a moment. And then finally, one of the pitfalls is sales leaders are using their gut feel and experience and are not as intentional and deliberate as they could be when inspecting big deals. When it's a small deal, a volume deal, functionality and cost, you don't need to do a Big Rock Review. You don't need all of the stuff we're going to talk about. But if it's a mid-sized deal or a large deal with lots of complexity, lots of competitors, lots of options, having a structured approach, in my experience, has found to be very helpful. Okay, so let me just pause there. Those are the pitfalls. Those are why big deals are so unpredictable. And that's why sales forecasting, despite all of the automation people use, is still very difficult, especially if you're not in a volume business, you're in a value business where big deals make up a big chunk of your sales forecast. Wins, losses, deferred, and no decision are things that you need to consider that actually have an impact on your forecast. All right? Everybody with me so far? Okay. So let's now talk about how can you predict the unpredictable. And I'm going to go through 5 of the top questions you should be asking. All right. And in my process, in my Big Rock review, there are actually 35 questions I ask. And what I've actually done over time is separated the Big Rock review into 2 parts, the rapid assessment review and the sales strategy review. What I often found when you get 5 or 6 people on the phone to do a sales strategy review, within the first 5 minutes, you discover that this deal is not well qualified and you're wasting everybody's time. So I've actually broken the Big Rock review into the rapid assessment review, which is about 15 or 20 minutes. You can tell whether this deal is qualified or not. And then if it is, you get the larger team together and actually run a sales strategy, which is about 45 minutes. So an hour in total. So these are my 5 favorite questions in a Big Rock review that I've used to really help inspect, assess, and coach sales teams through their big deals. So here's question number 1. How wide and deep is your team selling? Okay. Is the team selling to all the key stakeholders and covering all their bases? We talked about this a little bit earlier. And I'm going to show you how you can actually tell. So economic decision maker, financial approver, this is the critical contact who has the discretionary ability to spend the budget or reallocate funds to create a budget. It involves, that can be a rubber stamp. In a large bank, typically if a deal is already approved, the budget's approved, it's rubber stamped, or the financial approver can get very involved. But there's a few important words here. Discretionary ability to spend the budget. The economic buyer doesn't have to go to anybody to get budget released, not approved budget released, okay? And if they have no budget for a project, but it can provide a lot of value, they can reallocate funds from other budgets to fund a project. That's the economic decision maker. The platform decision maker, again, in the cloud deal, might be somebody who really decides which direction are we going from a platform perspective. There's the technical decision maker and technical recommender. These are the people, the technical decision maker, the person who has the final technical decision, who reviews and approves the technology, right? They may still have to get it signed off by their VP of finance, but they're approving all the alternate technical solutions. That's the technical decision maker and the technical recommender. People often believe the technical decision maker is also the financial approver. They may be, but often, especially in large organizations, they are not. Okay? There's a coach. The coach is the critical contact you need to develop who will share what's going on in the account when you're not in the room. They tell you what the competition is up to. They may not share their quotes, but they give you some insight. Hey, your price is too high. Competitor over here has a better solution. So a coach is a critical person you need to develop inside the account. Now, a champion is a bit different than coach. A champion is somebody who agrees to help you and get you access to the key decision makers in your account. Coach can do that too, but often the champion will help you get access to power. They may not share pricing or anything else, but help you get those meetings you need to actually get access to power. And the final one is the Fox. And nobody in an organization has the title Fox on their business card. But if you're in a room presenting to your client, and one of the customer participants walks in the room and everybody stops talking and looks at that person, that's often the Fox. That's the person who could change the evaluation criteria or the approval process. There's somebody with a lot of power who typically yields it pretty quietly. So you need to quickly decide, is that person the Fox, and can they change their criteria, and are they sold on your solution? So coach, champion, and Fox are often players that you may not uncover unless you actually know what you're looking for. Now, how can you tell? How can you easily keep track of where you are with all these different people? So I'll give you an example. I was doing a Big Rock review with a sales team with a large energy company, right? And there were a lot of moving parts. There was the line of business, there was IT, there was the financial decision maker. And I said to the rep, okay, how are we doing? Are you covering all your bases? And the rep put up this org chart and said, let me take you through the org chart. Now remember, the Big Rock review is 1 hour. I said, my head was going to explode. I said that org chart that's printed is not really going to tell you where the power base is. So I don't believe org charts that the customer gives you are that useful necessarily. Instead, I use the relationship map. Now, I didn't invent the relationship map. I've tuned it up a little bit. And what this relationship map is, it's in fact my favorite one-page tool I use inside a sales campaign to see how well the rep is running his sales campaign. And all it is all of the key decision makers fit in a box, and then we answer 3 simple questions for each decision maker, okay? And if two of the boxes are completed positively, the box goes from red to green. So the first question is, have you or your boss met the key stakeholder in person? Okay? In person. Yes or no? Have you met them? How does the stakeholder feel about your solution? Are they pro your solution? Neutral? Are they against you? Are they a mentor, or do you not know? And the third box is, are the key stakeholders in the power base? Are they a decision maker? Are they a direct influencer? Are they an indirect influencer, or do you not know? And then have you identified a coach or fox? So what I do, and if the rep understands their business, understands their customer, they can go through this relationship map, build a relationship map in 10 minutes. It's actually in an Excel spreadsheet. They just have to put some X's and O's. So this is what a poor relationship map looks like, okay? The technical decision maker and recommender is covered off. In this case, in this particular organization, there was a subject matter expert rep. They're all covered off. So you're selling pretty narrowly to just a few stakeholders. This relationship map is better. The technical decision maker, the technical recommender, you've identified a coach or champion, you have a subject matter expert, you have a partner involved. They're all positive about your solution. And this is what you're looking for the relationship map to go green. In here, the economic decision maker, the line of business decision maker, there was no fox identified. Even though this is better than previously, there's still a lot of risk and a lot of selling left to be done in the sales campaign. So that's what you're looking for. Now, you can tell a tremendous amount about the quality of a sales campaign based on the relationship map. Lousy, better, best in one sheet, and that speaks to you. You can tell a tremendous amount, and so I tell people to use the relationship map with your entire team. So a sales rep might have a technical resource, they might have a sales partner, they might have their boss. Get them to help you cover off all these bases and turn red to green. So use the relationship with the entire team to help identify relationship gaps, keep score, and communicate who needs to be influenced inside the account. A sales rep might go, hey, I can't get access to that VP in the bank, but somebody else inside my organization might know them, might golf with them, might be in a committee with them, and get their help to get access to power. So the relationship map is the first thing you need to do. Now, the second question I ask is, do you have a competitive edge in your sales campaign? Okay? So the first question is, how are you perceived in the account? This is, how does the customer perceive you? Are you a vendor? Are you a credible source? Are you a problem solver? Or are you a trusted advisor? So this is a question I ask the rep. How are you perceived? And all reps go, hey, I'm a trusted advisor. And I go, not so quick. Trusted advisor is your goal, but if you're brand new to this account and they're a prospect, not a customer, you're not a trusted advisor yet. It takes time and several successful projects before a sales rep and an organization can be a trusted advisor to the customer. So that's the first issue. How are you perceived in the account? Then the question is, do you have access to power? Can you get to the key decision makers? Do you know who they are? Does your boss or other execs in your organization know who they are? And this is, again, a primary role for the coach and champion, is to help you identify who's in the power base, irrespective of their title, and can you get me a meeting with them? Then the third one is have you met them in person? A phone call is okay. Through the pandemic, Zoom and Teams was a way to reach people when you couldn't actually go meet them. But in person is best. And part of that in-person meeting is to ask the decision maker to define what you need to do as a seller for you to win. And then, hey, if I do those things, would you actually give me the deal? Okay. So the fourth thing you need to do to develop a competitive edge, and this is critical, is have you identified and developed a coach or technical or champion inside the account? Okay. Remember, the coach is the critical contact to develop who will share what's going on in the room. They tell you what the competition is up to. The coach wants you to win. The champion is a decision maker in the power base who may not help you with everything, but they'll give you access to power. And they're prepared to help you win by getting you access to power. And then remember, the coach, the fox, is somebody who can change their criteria, has a lot of hidden power, and can change the approval process. So do you have a competitive edge? How are you perceived? Do you have access to power? Have you met the key decision maker in person? And I go, you can win big deals without doing all three of those extremely well. In my experience, it's extremely difficult to win a big deal without a coach or a champion inside the account telling you how your campaign is going. And the reason is campaigns bob and weave all the time. You're heading down a path. The customer moves this way, you keep moving that way, and the gap between you and the customer grows larger, and you don't even know it. Your coach will go, hey, there's some new things we're worrying about, or hey, your competition just introduced a feature or function that you need to have. So my experience, and that's why I spend a lot of time going, do you have a coach? Are they sharing what's going on when you're not in the room? The coach doesn't have to be an inside salesperson. If they start to sell on your behalf, sometimes they lose credibility. But you need somebody inside the account telling you how you're doing. And in my experience, it's extremely difficult to win without a coach. So that's how you develop a competitive edge. Now, the third question is, what's the compelling event that will ensure your deal closes when expected? This is really, how do you know this deal is going to close, when it's forecasted? If you've run a monthly forecasting business, how do you know it's going to close for the month? If you're a publicly traded company, in technology, certainly you're running a quarterly forecast and you need to hit your quarterly numbers. So what's the compelling event that will ensure the deal closes when expected from the customer's perspective? Okay, let me just pause and let that sink in. So what's the compelling event from the customer's perspective? Hey, the sales rep will say, hey, our quote expires at the end of the month or end of the quarter. Okay. The maintenance agreement expires and they're going to be out of support. These things may be compelling for you and your boss, but not for the customer. In my experience, customers have gotten too sophisticated. They're going to want the same price you offered on Friday. They're going to want that price on Monday, whether it crosses your quarter end or not. And if you're not prepared to do it, they're going to go to the second person and ask them. So compelling event from the customer's perspective. Now, here are some examples of compelling events. If you're working with a cloud hyperscaler, your contract will click over automatically to the next year. They have that built into their contract. So auto renewal dates for hyperscalers is a real compelling event. If you want to move from Amazon to Google, you need to do it before the contract expires or it clicks over. That's compelling. Significant cost savings from the customer's perspective, especially in recessionary times, can be compelling events. If your customer is launching a new product to their end users, to their customers, having your technology up and running so that they can meet their timeline to their customers can be compelling. Compliance and regulatory requirements, are dictated to your customer. That becomes compelling. If your customer buys somebody and they need to implement a new financial system through growth or acquisition, mergers, that can be compelling. If you have a security breach, you guys may be watching, or guys and gals, the security breach going on at London Drugs right now out west. They've closed all of their stores because of a security breach. Security breaches and preventing them, they've become very experienced. And so if customers had a security breach or they're worried about it, that becomes very compelling from them because they read about them all the time. The other question I ask is, what's the compelling event? Then I ask, what happens if the customer misses that compelling event? If nothing happens to the customer, it's not that compelling, okay? Compelling to you because your commission check gets delayed or you miss your forecast. Customer doesn't care about that. What happens to the customer if they miss that date and if nothing happens? That's not a compelling event. Now, gravity or do nothing is one of the biggest deal killers, right? I can go to solution A, solution B, or just keep what I have. That's a deal killer. Not every deal has a compelling event, and that's okay. It's just important that you understand that if there's no compelling event, your forecast has risk involved. That big deal may or may not close when forecasted because there's nothing compelling from the customer perspective that's going to help you. Okay? So that's question number 3. What's the compelling event? The fourth question is, what need or business outcome will the solution address? Okay? Again, I'm in technology, and so technical reps love to sell to technical buyers with money to talk about feeds and speeds and their needs. But here's an acronym, again, I didn't invent this, I just stole it, that you can use with your sales team. It's called NOS. Needs, outcomes, solution, and evidence. Most sales teams talk about the customer's needs and focus on their needs. Once they understand their needs, they go right to solutioning. Hey, that's your need. Let me talk to you about a solution I have, and let me give you proof in the form of evidence. But outcomes is the positive impact that will come from meeting those needs. And business outcomes are the motivation that moves customers forward, right? Replacing, one server with a faster server, the financial approver may not really understand what value they get. Talking about business outcomes to the customer is much more compelling, especially when you're not talking to the technical buyers, than talking about technology. So for a lot of reps, we don't train them to talk about business outcomes. And this is, technology is their comfort. Feeds and speeds of your product or solution is their comfort zone. If the customer is talking about strategy and relationship and risk and ROI, you got to make sure you're not talking about feeds and speeds. Now, for some reps, they're neither going to get a sales leader involved because your sales leaders are often more comfortable talking about business and business outcomes. So I often encourage sales teams to spend a lot more time understanding what business outcomes their customers are going to derive from their solutions. And that's a way to clearly differentiate yourself as a sales rep. Am I talking feeds and speeds, or am I talking about the business outcomes the customer is going to get? And can I prove them by implementing my solution? Okay. Now, the final thing I'll talk about business outcomes is projects get approved way more quickly if they're strategically relevant to the customer, they're tactically urgent, and they provide rapid time to value. Okay. Through the middle of COVID, big MRP solutions, big financial solutions that would take 3 years to get a financial return, customers weren't investing in. Customers want to know, is this thing strategically relevant? Is it something I worry about? Is it tactically urgent? Is it something I got to get on right now? And will it give me an ROI quickly, often within 12 months, right? So I ask my reps to think about, is the project strategically relevant, tactically urgent, provide rapid time to value? And if it does, then we're on the right track, right? All right. So let's talk about the last question, and then we'll have some time for questions. The fifth question, this one is actually my favorite question. It's called fatal flaws. And if you're a sales rep or you're a sales leader getting a sales call from a sales rep, you recognize that face. That's the phone call from the customer that says, hey, you ran a great sales campaign. I loved everything you were doing. Your solution looks fantastic. The price was pretty good, but we've decided to go in a different direction. Okay. And there's nothing more depressing than running a 3 or 6 or 9 month sales campaign only to get this bad news phone call because you missed something. You missed a fatal flaw. So one of the questions I ask in the sales strategy review is this question. If the prospect were to notify you today that you lost the deal, what fatal flaw in your campaign do you think they discovered that led to the loss? So remember, this is not after you've got the bad news phone call. This is part of the sales strategy review. If you were to get a phone call that you lost, what fatal flaw do you think they discovered? Okay. And then the question is, what will you do today to address the fatal flaws now before you get that bad news phone call? And I use this question often and early. What are the fatal flaws? Now, most solutions that we present to customers are not 100% match, right? There are things that we do better than others. Sometimes your competitor does certain things better. But if the thing that your competitor does is critical to the customer and you're trying to finesse and sell around it, and it's a fatal flaw, you're better to pull the plug than to run after a deal you can't win. And that's very hard for sales reps to do, especially if they've invested a lot of time. But often it's, hey, you lose the deal, let's go do a debrief with the customer. And I go, customers, after they've made a decision, often just spend time rationalizing their decision with you. You don't learn that much. But if you're a sales rep and just look in the mirror and go, what fatal flaws do I have in my deal? What are my weaknesses that I need to uncover? And if you ask this question early, I find that sales teams can often find ways to address shortfalls in their solution so they don't become fatal flaws. But, it's often important to live in reality from the customer's perspective about what's critical to them. So that's a question, that I got from one of my customers, actually, one of the people I was teaching the program. They said, hey, we use this question. It's called the look back question. And so I started to use it, and sales reps don't always like this question. Oh, we don't have any fatal flaws. Everybody has some things that they don't do well. And the real question is, how important are the things you don't do well to the customer? And if there's no workaround, you're best to discover that early before you invest a ton of time in a sales campaign that you can actually win. Okay, so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. There's the 5 top questions you should be asking. How wide and deep is your team selling? That's all about the relationship map. Do you have a competitive edge in your sales campaign? That's all about finding a coach and champion who will help you on your journey through the top 10 steps. What compelling event will ensure your deal closes when expected? Remember, compelling from the customer's perspective, not your perspective, your numbers, or your commission check. What needs, and more importantly, what business outcomes will your solution address? I think this one is a critical one. If you're talking business outcomes and your competitor's talking feeds and speeds, this will resonate in a big way with your customer. Business outcomes, impact on their business that your solution brings, really important one. And then finally, what fatal flaws did the customer uncover that could derail your deal? All right. So just before we go, here's some additional resources, and I'll let you either take a picture of that or take some notes here. The first is this downloadable toolkit. So if you go to my website, salesleadersonly.com/CPSA, Canadian Professional Sales Association, but CPSA, you'll find the relationship map, you'll find the roadmap, you'll find some other tools that you can use. Feel free to use them and implement them in your business. You'll also find my website. On my website is a video. It's a short video. It's about 10 minutes that will help sales leaders think about inspecting, assessing, and coaching their team. So a little bit more insight into the process I use around big deal inspection. Finally, you'll find a copy, a link to my book, Winning the Six-Figure Sale. That's a short, helpful book that talks about the process that gives you a lot of the questions we didn't cover today. You can also sign up on my website to my weekly sales letter. I call it the Saturday Sales Leader. And every Saturday, I send you a tip that you can read in less than 3 or 4 minutes to really help you along your journey for complex sales. All right, so there's the toolkit. Feel free to use anything you can. All those assets are available on my website. Please feel free to share it. And here are some other upcoming events from CPSA that you might have interest in. All right, so let me pause there, Rupalin. We have a little time if we have any questions.
Thanks
Is there anything
so
I
much,
can,
Jeff.
anyone I can cover for you?
What I've done is I've just gone ahead and pasted all of your relevant links to your supporting resources into the chat function there. So for everybody who are interested in just accessing those resources, please go ahead and have a quick look at the chat bar there, where you'll see the links that Jeff has just provided. I would just copy and paste those links just to make sure that you've captured every fact in the URL there. But as Jeff had mentioned, please feel free to enter any of your questions that you might have on today's content into the chat box there. We've got a few minutes to discuss or cover any questions. Thanks, Nicole, for the great compliment there. Thanks for that. Or feel free to unmute yourself. All right, well, if there are no questions, we'll let everybody go 5 minutes early. Thanks so much to everybody who's joined today's session. And again, our next webinar here at the CPSA will take place on May 29th. And that session will be with our partner at Phone Burner on driving higher responses and outbound call answer rates. And we'll see you at the next one. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank
Bye,
you.
Bye now.
Jeff. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Great selling.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.